Folk number 64 is Mark Coyne. Mark was born in Brisbane, playing his junior football with South Sunnybank before joining Brothers, where he played on the wing and scored a try in the Brethren's 1987 BRL Grand Final win over Redcliffe. In 1988, Mark moved to Sydney, joining St George, where he played 223 games, appearing in 3 grand finals for the club, captaining the Dragons in the 1996 loss to Manly. Mark Coyne played 19 games for Queensland after making his debut in 1990. He was a member of the 1995 Neville Nobody side and was the scorer of the miracle try in 1994. Mark played 9 tests for Australia and was a member of the 1995 World Cup winning side that defeated England at Wembley. Well, Mark Coyne, thanks for your time. What does it mean to you to be a folk?
Oh, it's really special because I grew up in Sunnybank and played league since I was, 7 years old, and, just sort of when Origin started, I used to go to the games at Lang Park, and just it was an admiration of the guys playing, and, obviously love Queensland, love Mal and love Wally, and I just look back now and go, I cannot believe I actually got to play with Wally in the 1990 series, and got to play with Mal, and that's just a young kid at Sunnybank who used to play backyard footy with his brothers. It's a dream come true, and I'm just so forever grateful for getting the opportunity to pull that Maroon jersey on, and it's probably the most special jersey you can pull on.
So take us back to those early days growing up in Sunnybank. What was it like?
It was pretty good fun. We had a nice big backyard, and I'm the youngest of 4. I had 2 older brothers, and we had a lot of backyard footy. Playing against my brother Peter, who went on and played a lot of games up here in the Brisbane comp, and came down for the Dragons for a year and a half. And my older brother Terry was quite a good rugby, under-21s Australian rugby player, and we had great competitive games in the backyard, which was good. So I just had a really normal, I suppose, the Queensland upbringing where you spend a lot of time out in the sun and in the backyard and playing games, and I suppose to a degree I sort of learnt all the skills about playing footy, in those backyard games.
So when did it start getting serious for you, going from, not that it didn't become fun later as well, but the realisation that you're a handy player and potentially there could be a career in it for you?
Yeah, probably not until the under-19s. I played I made the Brisbane combined under-7s team, so I never made a rep team until I played State of Origin. So I was never really a guy that stood out. Kevy and Kerry got picked. They were my age, and they got picked in all the Brisbane teams and Queensland teams. It's probably under 19s when I followed a good mate of mine I went to school with. He went to Brothers to play on a scholarship, and I decided to go and join him and play over there. And I had a year under 18s where the coach, a guy called David Stafford, he put me in the centres, and that was probably the first time that I'd played in the back line. As I said, I was a half-back and 5'8" until then, and then I had a run on the centres, and I thought, this is actually not a bad position for me. And then the next year they moved under 18s to under 19s. Under 19s I had a really super year with Brothers. We made it through to the grand final and unfortunately got beaten in the GF, but I had a really good year individually, and that was probably the year that I thought, I was just proud of myself that I had a really good year and felt like I was a reasonable player. And then the next year, when Ross Drodwick was coaching the Brothers' 1987 team, and Vinny O'Brien, who was the winger, he broke his jaw in a game, and then Ross put me up in the first grade. So I went, pretty much run the 19s the year before in the first grade for the last 10 games of the year for Brothers, and that was the year that they went through and won the premiership against, we beat Redcliffe in the grand final, and St George had sent a couple of scouts up to have a look at Clinton Moore and Trevor Bailey and Peter Gill and Steve Carter, who are all great players, and St George signed all those 4 guys, and I think they sort of signed me as an afterthought because I was only like 20 years old, and I wasn't, by no means was I a big sort of size at that stage anyway, and so they offered me a contract to go down to play it in the Dragons, and I'd always gone for the Dragons since I was 7 years old, so it was a bit of a dream come true for them to be chasing me. I just finished my degree at Queensland University of Technology, and so the timing was just, everything just worked out. So I headed down to Sydney to play with the 4 other guys from Brothers.
Did that make it easier, the fact that you weren't going on your own, you were going with guys you knew well?
100%, yeah, it really did. The only sort of negative part of it was I was playing first grade with those 4 other guys in Brisbane, and then when we went down to play for the Dragons, four of us lived together. So I lived with Clinton Moore and Trevor Bailey and Peter Gill. We had a house at Rockdale, which was a bit of a fun time. But they all got put in the first grade, and the Dragons thought I'd be better off playing a year in under 21s down there. So I was a bit frustrated that, you know, my teammates that I just won a premiership were up playing first grade, and I was stuck back down in 21. So whilst, you know, I didn't really enjoy that, and I often thought about whether I'd come home to Brisbane during that first year in 1988, I decided to stick it out. And then, the next year I had a bit of a better year. I went into the reserve grade team, and then halfway through the year I got into first grade and pretty much stayed there until the end. And, you know, Gilly and Clinton and Trevor Bailey just sort of stayed the 2 years on their contracts, and they came back to Brisbane. I think Clinton and Peter Gill went to the Gold Coast, and I think Trevor retired. So, yeah, it was sort of funny. I think I was the one that was the least likely to sort of make it down in Sydney, but I ended up being there the longest.
Was there anything in particular that made you stay? What kept you there?
Well, you'll find this sort of a bit weird, but because it was a year when my mates were turning 21 back in Brisbane, and I was down there playing under 21s in Sydney, I was sneaking back home before games and getting on the drink with all my mates who were turning 21. Then I'd secretly fly back to Sydney the next day and play a game in under 21s. So I think during that period, that's when I sort of had a real lot of homesickness. And then I was thinking about going home. I seriously thought about going home, and then I just thought, look, I'm down here, I'll just stick it out. I had a 2-year contract, so I thought I'll just stick it out for the second year and see how I go. And I ended up having a really good year in the under 19s, and I think I won the Player of the Year in the under 19s and for the Dragons, the under 21s for the Dragons. And then I thought, seeing I won that, I might give it another year and see how I go. And then thankfully Craig Young, who was the coach, you know, gave me the opportunity halfway through the year to go up in the first grade. And as I said, that's where I stayed.
And how'd you find first grade in Sydney compared to Brisbane?
Yeah, hard. It's super fast down there. It's not as fast as State of Origin, obviously, but no, it's hard. It's, you know, a couple of the clubs were sort of full time then and getting competitive, and it was hard. And St George didn't have a great roster at the time and hadn't been performing all that well. So we had, you know, I think my first year in '89 was a really hard year. 90 again was a bit of a tough year, albeit I got to play Origin in 1990. I got picked to play Origin, and then probably we got Brian Smith as a coach, you know, in 91, and I think he started turning the club around a little bit with some of his disciplines, and then obviously 92, 93 were grand final years. We didn't beat the Bronx, but we sort of, you know, had a great year anyway. Like, to get to a grand final was pretty special, and I got to play in 3 grand finals, which was pretty cool, but still heartbreaking when you lose all 3.
Well,
so.
I didn't know whether I should bring that up a little bit later, but now that you've brought it up now, it obviously still, not so much rankles, but it's obviously that itch there that just can't be scratched.
Yeah, no, you can't. And, you know, obviously, you know, plenty of other players go through a whole career, don't get to play. I got to play in 3, so I sort of take consolation with that. I find the hardest part of the year is when Alan Langer's been drinking all night and rings me and seeing Saints can't play down the telephone line to me. So, but no, look, I probably initially after I retired, I still found it really hard to watch a grand final. I actually didn't really watch grand finals for a lot of years because it hurt a lot watching, you know, the team who won doing the victory laps, and that hurt a lot. But just over the years, you sort of realise that you know, footy was still a great thing for me, and I got a lot of great memories of my time playing the game, and whilst I didn't get a grand final, I still got plenty of memories, so I just tend to focus more on the good memories.
Well, one of those is 1990, and that phone call. A lot of things have changed in many years about how players find out how they're playing for Queensland for the first time. How did it happen for you?
You know, you didn't get a phone call back then. They used to ring the club and tell the club, so I think I found out that from the coach, which probably was Craig Young. I think it might even been Jeff Carr, who was I think it was Jeff Carr who was the CEO. And my run was a bit weird because I came into Origin camp in 1990 as the 18th man, so I was on standby for Wally Lewis. So it was a really weird feeling because I was in the hotel, and back then the fitness test that Wally had to do was running up and down the hallway of the travel lodge. So I'm sitting there sort of watching Wally run up and down the hallway going, what do I want? Like, Wally's like my idol and I want him to play, but then if he doesn't play, then I'm going to get to play. So ultimately, Wally, he failed the fitness test, and I came in for game 1. And unfortunately, we lost that game. And then game 2, I think we went down to Melbourne, and Wally came back. So I did get the opportunity to play actually a State of Origin with Wally, which was like a real, wow moment for, a young kid that had grown up in, the backyard of Sunnybank. But then we lost that series as well. And then I sort of didn't get much time on. I was coming off the bench, and back then when you came on off the bench, it wasn't the interchange. Like when you're on, you're on. So I only sort of got games at the back end of the time period. But yeah, then I didn't get picked for the third game. I got dropped for the third game, and then I got dropped for the whole next year. 91, I didn't get picked at all. And then I must have been able to force my way back in 92. So then I stayed from 92 pretty much through till 1997, I think was my last series.
Yeah, 19 games for Queensland after watching Wally running up and down the hall. Yeah. I asked this about a lot of players, particularly I suppose in your instance where you made the point that you'd never made a rep side until late in your teens. Was there any self-doubt heading into Origin as to whether or not you were up to it? Because a lot of pressure is on players representing, Queensland and New South Wales, but a lot of players want to play for Queensland so badly it can sort of be overwhelming. What were your memories of knowing you were going to play?
Yeah, I think 1990 was definitely, what the hell am I doing here? Like, this is such a biggest overachievement I've ever heard of, ever. For me to be picked to play in 1990, albeit, it was to depending on how Wally was going to play. But definitely that one. But I think I didn't get picked at all in the 91 series. The 92 series and 93, I was playing good footy at the Dragons, and I definitely didn't feel like I was out of place in camp then. And then once I sort of had 92 and 93, and I felt like I handled Origin pretty well in terms of the speed and the impacts and all that sort of stuff. So I never really had any doubts. But 1990, definitely I was going, what am I doing here? But by the time I got around in 92, I felt comfortable. And to be fair, guys like Mal and Alf and Kevy, all those guys, they make you feel part of the team really well. And I've got great relationships with all those guys over the years. Even though they beat me in 2 grand finals, the Kevy and Alf, and still give me a hard time. Like they're really good mates of mine, and I love playing with those guys. You can see why they were such legends of the game, because they're so competitive and they're such skillful players.
Every player that has played State of Origin, it's a wonderful achievement and is a moment in history. Then there's the elite players in Origin who are remembered for individual or team moments. You're fortunate enough to be in folklore for all Queenslanders of scoring the miracle try, as it's now known. What does that mean to you?
Oh, it's really special because it is. It's just, I always think someone's going to score a better try. I used to always think that at one point someone will beat that try, but it's just stood the test of time. And I think it's just, the fact that it was in the last minute, and obviously the ball movement was quite incredible to go from one side of the field to the other and to finish it off. I always make sure that whenever I talk about it, is that I just got to finish it. And, whilst I did a little bit of work to get there, the work that was done before me was done by a lot of the great players in the team. And I'm just really thankful that obviously it worked out the way it did, and the ball went from one side, as I said, back again. And forever thankful for Mel, Mel to draw that last player and get me the ball with a bit of room to move. And I don't think it was any secret I had a really good right foot step in my career. It's about the only thing I had really in my armoury, and it suited me perfectly because they were all flying over from the other side of the field, and I was on my right foot. So I never really felt any doubt that I wouldn't get there. I felt as soon as Mel gave me the ball, I knew I'd get there because I knew I'd beat him on the inside with my right foot, and ultimately I did. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I suppose it wouldn't have been a great moment if it wasn't a great game leading up to that as well, that it meant so much. Do you have memories of the game itself other than the try?
Yeah, I do, because it's sort of it was again, that was a days where you sort of came on, then you were on. So I didn't get on until like 8 minutes to go. So I'd sat on the bench for pretty much most of the game. And then then, it just happened. The thing I remember the most about it is when the ball sort of went out to the other side of the field, I could see when it got passed back inside, I could see that they were running out of numbers, New South Wales, and I just knew that the ball kept coming out to me, then I'd have a good chance of getting it. So I've always been a good, so I like maths, so I always counted numbers pretty good. So the ball came back to me and I got it over the line, and sort of the weird thing about, not the weird thing, but just people don't maybe know a lot about it, but after the game I was just absolutely mobbed by all the media, as you would expect, because I was the one that scored the try, and I felt really uncomfortable because I've always felt that unless you play like an 80-minute game, you sort of feel like you've really been in the game and you've lived through all the ups and downs of the game. But I sort of came on with only a short time to go and scored the try, so I didn't really feel like I contributed a lot to the game. Obviously over time I claim it pretty good now, but no, at the time I felt really overwhelmed by all the attention in the dressing room, and sort of felt like my jersey was still pretty clean. I wasn't gassed out because I'd only been on there for a short time, and just all the people at me, I just felt overwhelmed. So I actually went home early that night. Usually I would hang around and go out, we'd all have beers after the game and celebrate, but I was just overwhelmed by all the attention. So I actually had a quiet night and drove home. It was funny because I was driving my wife home that night, and I had one beer after the game, and I got pulled over to do a random breath test. And the policeman said, "Where have you been to?" And I said, "I've just been out watching the footy." And he said, "You had anything to drink?" I said, "I just had one beer." So he breathalyzed me. I thought if he had known I scored that try, he might have locked me up. But
a false reading, maybe.
Yeah, false reading. But no, so I had a pretty quiet night that night. And then obviously the next few days it was a lot of media and that sort of stuff. But again, I feel very privileged to be the one that finished off that try. But obviously I've got to recognise that a lot of the other guys played a big part in it as well.
Well, one of your fellow Fogs sitting in that chair as well said that he roomed with you, and we're talking Mark Coyne here, during Origin, and he says that you told him that you had a dream you'd score a try. Is that true?
Yeah, it was sort of true. We had a bit of a joke, Honey and I, because I reckon in that camp in '94, usually when you go into Origin camp, generally the media will interview, you about, because they're always getting different angles of the players. And I reckon that camp, I said, Honey and I were just saying how we didn't have one media person come and talk to us at all. It's like we were like nobodies, like no one wanted to talk to us because we were on the bench. We were both on the bench. And we sort of were joking around that. And I think I said on the bus on the way there, so I imagine if one of us scored the winning try, we can tell the media that we don't want to talk to them because they didn't bother talking to us all week. So we sort of joked about that. And then, lo and behold, like I scored the winning try. And of course I talked to the media. It was just sort of a comment I made because usually in Origin camp, people are usually talking to your media and whether you're on the bench or not. But it's just one of those times where, no one was interested in talking.
They just brushed you.
Just brushed us. So.
You used the word nobodies when you were talking about then, because that leads us nicely into the next year. And ironically, you and Mark Coyne, members of the Neville Nobodies, as Fatty's team was termed, and you were basically the only ones, along with Dale Shearer, of course, and Adrian Lamb had played Test football as well. But ironically, you and your roomie weren't nobodies. Where does 95 sit?
Well, I had a different roomie in 95. Right. So I always got the roomies that were sometimes a little bit hard to be roomies with. I won't name who, and I always got ones that...
well, you've named Honey.
That was... Honey was all right. Honey was all right. Except when he came in and broke the door down one night, but I won't tell that story. But I had Benny Eichen in the 95 camp, so I got Benny, who was
babysitting.
I was babysitting Benny Eichen, and so he was my roomie in camp. But 95 was just. I still shake my head and just don't know how he even won one game in that series because obviously getting Fatty in, obviously there's a Super League war that was happening, so no one could get picked who'd signed Super League for Queensland. So we really had players that. Ben Eichen's a classic example. I think he probably had played only 6 games or 7 games for the Gold Coast, and next minute he's putting a Maroon jersey on. So, I think it was a very special series, not just because we won it, but just the way that Fatty, what he did for us. And he came in and, none of us really knew that he could coach, but he was a really, really good coach. He'd done a lot of the research and all that sort of stuff. And some of the things he did at training, just getting us to defend our line. We used to finish training, every training session defending our line. for 3 or 4 sets of 6. And then during that series, I reckon we saved probably about 15 tries with New South Wales hammering in our line. So he was a smart coach, Fatty, and you know, he was a great guy who brought the team together with Chris Close as well. He was the manager, and we sort of had a smattering of blokes who had played a bit, like you said, me and I think Gary Larson and Billy Moore and those guys, Dale, Shearer, and then, you know, the young guys that came in. But it just, you know, worked beautifully, and to win that first game, I think the first game was down in Sydney, and we won that 2-0. I think it was
Wayne Bartram kicked the goal.
Wayne Bartram kicked that goal, and just winning that game gave us belief, I think, that we could actually do this. And then going down to Melbourne, you know, again, you know, we saved lots of tries down there on our line and got away with the win down there. And then, you know, obviously coming back here to Suncorp and playing in front of our home crowd to get a clean sweep was remarkable. So, yeah, I still shake my head and go, how did we win that series? But it's just a classic example of, you know, that Queensland spirit. And when no one, you know, ever gives us a chance, we just find a way to do it.
A lot of the members of that 95 side that have been here as well speak about that Game 3 in Brisbane, of course, Gilly getting out of hospital, etc. But they speak about it in terms of the celebration with the fans and the atmosphere. You played 19 games, you played in grand finals, you played in test matches. What are your memories with regards to the celebration and the atmosphere of that Neville Nobody side for Game 3 across the road here?
I'm just proud. Like, you know, I growing up in Brisbane and, you know, going to the Origin games since I was, you know, 7 years old. I used to go out and watch the games at Lang Park. Just proud because I know what it means for Queensland supporters. Like, to win an Origin match is sort of the pinnacle of what maybe Sheffield Shield is probably similar nowadays, but certainly winning an Origin series is, you know, what every young Queensland footballer wants to achieve in their career. And I just know how important it is to Queensland. So, you know, to win that series, particularly when people probably thought that we were no chance of winning. And again, it's that real sort of the underdog sort of mentality that we've always had, you know, through the years and years of Origin since 1980. And yeah, it's just real sense of, you know, pride that we were able to do that for the people of Queensland. And you know, as I said, for me, I just love going to watch Origin, and you know, I knew what it was like to be a young kid, you know, looking out and admiring, you know, the people in the Maroon jersey, and to be one of those persons in that jersey, and to actually, you know, deliver, you know, a 3-0 clean sweep when we weren't given any chance was you know, really special. 19
games, and that was the only series win?
Yeah, I know, it's pretty rough, but that's how it worked out. So yeah.
So that obviously made it more special, but it also highlights how bloody hard it is to win a State of Origin series.
Yeah, it is obviously really hard. Like, we lost some really close games to lose the series. But, you know, in saying that, New South Wales always are a quality team. Like, you really can't look at any New South Wales teams, and on paper they're always, you know, generally they're far superior. Probably except for, you know, the period where Mel had, you know, JT and Lockie and Cooper and all those guys.
Some handy players.
There were some handy players. GI, there's some handy players there. But, you know, we've always generally go in as the underdog, so it's always hard. But yeah, you know, I don't think I ever lost the series 3-0, so I count that in the tick column. But yeah, they're hard games to win. Then series are hard games it's hard to win 2 out of 3. It's tough, and unfortunately, as I said, there's lots of things I'd like to take it out of or have different in terms of my career, but you're not winning a grand final, and probably, you know, would have liked to win a couple more Origin series, but as I said, you know, I've sort of, you know, gotten past all that now. And
well, you spent all your career in Sydney in the NRL level, playing with the Dragons, St George, and then St George Illawarra. Was there ever a time you either thought about coming home or were offered the chance to come home, or did that never eventuate?
Yeah, no, I had a big opportunity to come back when the Crushers were coming in. So Crushers were pretty keen on getting me back, which I think would have been about 95 or 96? I can't quite remember.
95.
The year, 95. So I probably came reasonably close. It just got a bit tricky because I was captain of the Dragons at the time. So, you know, as I said, I've always gone for the Dragons, and to actually, you know, be given the captaincy was something special for me. You know, in terms of, you know, my upbringing and the team I followed. So I ended up saying no to going back to to the Crushers, and it was a hard decision. I could have gone back and been with my family back there, but I'd been in Sydney for a while by then. And I was pretty settled down there. So no, I was always pretty loyal to stay at the Dragons. Probably in '96 even, I think I got a big offer to go to the Roosters as well, and I declined that. Sometimes in hindsight I look at that and go, I love that I played for one club like that. That's been really important for me, and I think post my sporting career, I think having played at one club has been quite beneficial for me in my business career. But then I look at it and I think my last year in '99, I didn't have a great year, and I ended up getting an injury which made me retire halfway through, but I didn't have a great year playing wise, and I often wonder whether had I changed clubs and gone to a different club, whether that would have given me a bit more of a boost and a bit more motivation to play maybe differently. I don't know. It's one of those questions that it's hard to know.
How long's a piece of string?
Yeah, that's right. But I think ultimately now, I'm a long time out of the game now, but ultimately I'm pretty happy that I did stay at the one club and played over 200 games for one of the most sort of famous clubs in the game. So I'm pretty proud of that overall.
And at Dragons International, what does it mean to you to have represented your country?
Yeah, it was pretty special as well. It was really good to go over there. We went over to England and played in the World Cup, and that was pretty special to play at Wembley over there and get the win in 1995 and do that with some super players like Freddie Fittler and Timmy Brasher and those sort of guys. I can't look back on my career and think I haven't done a lot despite not winning a premiership. But I look back on my career and I'm really proud about what I was able to achieve. Particularly as I highlighted before, I never made a rep team my whole life until I played Origin really, so I'm pretty proud about what I was able to achieve, and a lot of it came from hard work. So I didn't have lots and lots of skills, but I certainly at training I worked really hard to make sure that I was always forefront of the coach's mind when they were picking teams.
Who had the biggest influence on your career?
Oh, Brian Smith, without a doubt. Brian's got detractors, and he probably was he was a hard-ass coach, and he was pretty tough. And I think sometimes he probably maybe went too hard sometimes on the players. But for me, he made me a different player. Like, he really gave me a lot of confidence. It taught me a lot of things, a lot of the basic things, just the training around catching and passing all the time, and that's what you should be constantly doing. So I think Brian was great. Craig Young gave me my first start in there, so he was someone who was good as well for me. But Brian coached me most of my career, and even David Waite was really good because he had a different sort of perspective when he took over from Brian, and he taught me different things. So I think as long as you keep learning, I'm always a big believer that you should never get comfortable. You should always keep learning, and all the coaches like that have always managed to teach me something.
Well, Fog number 64, Mark Coyne, thank you so much for your time and congratulations on a wonderful career.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Fog's Queenslander podcast. If there's a Fog you want to hear from, leave a comment to let us know. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos.